Hey, farmers and landowners, this is Damian Mason coming at you with a question. Have you ever had disease or pest problems cost you money by reducing your yield? Well, of course you have. We fight this, right? That's what production agriculture is all about, is working as best we can to put out a great yield, and to do so, oftentimes, you've got to overcome disease and pests. The problem is we usually treat those diseases and pests after the problem, right? So what if you could do it proactively? What if you had a tool that gave you predictive analytics so that you would know if you have things like corn rootworm, soybean cyst nematode, sudden death syndrome? Well, you have that tool now. It's from Pattern Ag. Pattern Ag doing predictive soil analytics way beyond just the old days of sticking a probe in the ground every few acres and saying, hey, wow, we got some nitrogen deficiency here. They'll let you know if you have pest and disease. Go to pattern.ag. That's www.pattern.ag to learn more about this awesome technology and how it can help you increase your yields by taking care of diseases and pests before they cause you harm. Well, greetings and thanks for joining me here at the Business of Agriculture podcast. I have a great topic for you today. We're talking about finding fairness in farm transition. That's a topic and a title that was given to me by Elaine Froese. She's a Manitoba farmer, and also a speaker. She helps farm companies, farm business people think about their business and do it the right way. You know, let's face it. You've got these businesses out here. This whole idea of Ma and Pa kettle or American Gothic and bib overalls and a pitchfork is all really quite insulting, I think, to agricultural professionals. You got millions of dollars of capital at risk. You've got the land resource, you've got the grain facilities, the livestock facilities, you've got operating loans. This is a business. Hence, that's why I started this over 5 years ago and called my podcast The Business of Agriculture, because we talk about business. So as a business, what does your succession plan look like? And maybe you're not a farm owner, or maybe you don't farm, you just own some ground and you have a corporate job, whatever. This is kind of important for everybody because everyone should have a transition plan, a succession plan, a will, an estate plan, et cetera, et cetera. It's what business people do. I was frankly offended about a decade ago when my brother was over here and he was still alive and he was a farmer and he said, hey, I'm going on a plane trip tomorrow. If my plane goes down, you're in charge. And I said, that's not an estate plan. That is not a business. What are you doing? You've got 2 kids that are under the age of 18. You've got millions of dollars of capital at risk, livestock, an ongoing concern, 3 employees, and I'm in charge. That's the plan. So anyway, that's not an uncommon situation, is it, Elaine?
Well, that's what upsets me so much, Damian, when I'm working as a farm family coach with, the founders who are older and the younger next gen, 35-year-olds with the spouse and a couple of kids. And I say, you do have a will, don't you? And then their head drops. And I go, come on, let's get some basic tools and agreements in place to create better contingency plans. So the question is, what if? What if your brother did die in that plane crash? What if, who, and where is it written that the old die first? I lost my sister at the age of 23 to a drunk driver. I lost my mom at 65, which is the age I'm at now. So I would just like the listeners to really think about if something happened to you tomorrow, would you be prepared or would you be leaving your family in chaos? And the finding fairness piece, I think, is what keeps business people up at night. They're lying in bed and I use these rings. I have my family circle, the management circle, and the ownership circle. But if you're lying in bed at night and you have family members who are not heirs to the business, you're lying awake because you're thinking, oh my goodness, I don't want to wreck the business and pull it apart, especially if it's a farm business, but it could be any kind of business. And then how are you going to be fair, or what does fairness look like to your non-family heirs? So my question, Damian, for your listeners is, what does fairness mean to you? And what's your definition of fairness?
Well, first off, you and I both know, and it's a neat topic for you because this is it's a good title. First off, because there's no such thing. As I always point out, you know what fair is? Fair is a place where you get elephant ears and corn dogs, and they reward blue ribbons to pigs. That's a fair. Okay. That's a fair. There's no such thing as fair because ask 10 people their definition of fair. And then I was asked once when somebody was talking about their estate. Obviously, I talked to a lot of people that are in agriculture, et cetera. And they said, well, such and such son doesn't make as much money, so I should really give him more than so and so. I said, well, what? And they said, wouldn't that be fair? And I said, well, equal is fair. If you're talking about what you're going to give to your three kids, you don't owe them nothing. But if you want to know what's fair, equal is fair. What you just described was the entire concept of socialism or Marxism, frankly, from each according to his means. So fair doesn't mean, well, this sister doesn't make much money, so I'm going to give her twice as much. And then this one over here, that's not really fair.
So Damian, what you're speaking to, and I love the phrase, where is it written? And you're a guy who's always contrarian or challenging status quo. So this is a great phrase for you to use. Where is it written? Where is it written that as business owners, we are to make all of our children economically equal? And I actually am trying to remove in the mindset of agriculture, particularly because that's the lane I'm in too, is I'm trying to remove the word equal. And my definition of fairness is how can we help everyone in this family be successful? And success to different people looks different. I'm the eldest of 5 children. Then when my sisters died, there were 4. My brother and I have always been wealthier than our farming parents. So when we sat down to have this conversation about fairness and expectations for the future, I said, I'm good. Whatever comes my way after you pass would be a gift or a blessing. And my mom, unfortunately, died 6 weeks after I uttered that sentence to her. So the whole fairness issue, what I want people to understand is in the business of agriculture, what I'm seeing in the coaching work that I do all across North America and Canada is a lot of, when you talk about compensation that you just mentioned between one brother who's not working as hard or has a different skill set than the other sister or sibling or whatever, I'm seeing a lot of founders not paying attention to the basics, i.e. their living, what they want to live on, to live the lifestyle they always wanted for the next 25 to 30 years. And I have a call with an American banker and financial planner this afternoon with a family I'm coaching in the US. And the clash is between dad not wanting to have any debt going forward and son wanting to be able to cash flow the debt. So we have a lot of financial conversations, Damian, which to you and I are basic, but they're not happening.
Now, first off, you said to you and I are basic because you obviously have seen some of my stuff. And I think I wrote one of my business books and I said, this seems kind of rudimentary for a business book. And one of my buddies that was advising me on the thing said, it's rudimentary to you. He's like, I said, you think I really need to put in how to do a balance sheet? And they said, yeah, you need to put in your business book how to do a balance sheet. And I said, okay, you would think that someone is a business person, but again, it's rudimentary and it's not, and you're not being insulting when you say this. It's just that you and I look at this and say, of course there should be an estate plan. Of course you should do this. Of course you should do that. And as you pointed out, I've always found it interesting, particularly in agriculture. And it's probably everywhere, but this is the sandbox you and I play in agriculture. Like you said, you ask someone, I bet you they would go out and put in a 14-hour day. They would drive that tractor. It would be on a combine for 14 hours. And you're like, okay, have you met with an attorney and handled your will? And they hang their head because you want to say, you know what's hard? Working 14-hour days during harvest season. You know what's easy? Making a phone call and going and having this sit down for 2 hours. But it's not easy because it's questions they don't want to ask. They don't want to answer.
I always say, Damian, the 2 biggest things that are killing agriculture in 2022 and before are conflict avoidance and procrastination. It doesn't matter what kind of business it is, but a successful business person has a mantra that is, we're going to focus and we're going to execute. But if you're lying in bed on the family dynamic, wondering what you're going to do with your kids, what you're not doing is you're not embracing conflict resolution as a business risk management strategy. And as a farm family coach, my goal is to help farm families be clear about expectations, have certainty of timelines and agreements, all kinds of agreements, and then a commitment to action, which is what you do in business, right? You focus and you execute. So why are they not getting to the table? Why are they not calling the lawyer? Because they are afraid of having conversations that count with their families.
So Elaine, I got a question for you, and we're not going to get the right. I'm not sure there's it's not like a math equation where there's one right answer, but
okay.
if you've got, we love to talk about family farms, and that's true in Canada where you live, and it's true in Indiana where I live. Family farm. We love to talk about that. 97% of all the farms in the United States of America are family operations. Blah, blah. We've heard all this. So anyway, that's
worth millions.
But they're also businesses. And so do you think that we're worse at it in ag than, say, the family that owns restaurant franchises, or the family that owns 6 dry cleaners in Phoenix, where I live during the winter? Does that family business do a better job of transition, succession, compensating their kids, handling things as a business? Do you think they're better at it than we are? Do you think this is the case with all family?
I think the family businesses apply across whichever sector you're in, Damian. And I follow Lance Woodbury, and he had a great article recently that talked about the perils of family and business, because what draws you together as a family is a place of love and nurture and support. And of course, the value system, or what's happening in business, right, are decision-making based on facts, data, and competition and vision and all those other things. I don't think those two things are exclusive, but what Lance was pointing to is there's an inbuilt tension between those two systems. And I have a family. I've coached insurance businesses, boutique insurance businesses. I've coached housing construction families. I have a roofing company right now that's looking for a way to de-escalate 12 years of conflict.
De-escalate 12 years of conflict. Okay. And the good thing is most family businesses is 50 years of family conflict. So you're saying it's not specific to agriculture. It's more of an issue. So do you think that the family that has 6 dry cleaning outlets in Phoenix, do you think that they've at least got a will and an estate plan? Or do you think that they're also not handling things the way our agriculture friends oftentimes don't?
I don't know the stats on that because I'm not a dry cleaning industry specialist, but I would suspect that 20% of people who own family businesses do not have a will. And
I think it might be higher than that.
Well, and in some cases, it may be as high as 50%, because there was a study done by the University of Guelph way back in 1997, where 20% of the farmers in that study did not have a will. And when they were asked why, their reasoning was just so funky, awful. It says, well, if I make a will, that means I'm going to die. And so Damian, what we're really talking about here is the mindset in agriculture and the culture of agriculture. So the culture, Peter Drucker had this famous saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Mm-hmm. And what that means is, for anyone listening to this, they just need to write down 3 words: believe, behave, decide. So what are your core values? What do you believe to be true? I don't believe that I'm going to die if I make a will. My core value is intimacy and relationships. So I want my family relationships to be rich, and I don't want the will, estate, or the plan for our farm business to tear the family apart. The second one is, how do you behave towards each other? Do you respect each other? And do you also, as a rule, so take in our family, my husband's 65, my son is 33. They both one has an ag degree, one has an ag diploma. Guess what, Damian? They are business partners. They are in a joint venture. He has a corp.
That's
together.
fantastic.
Joint venture. That is never going to shift.
So wait, are you telling me the old proverbial, the cobbler's kid has no shoes? You're the person that goes around North America coaching agricultural businesses and families on how to do this right, and you actually are doing it right at home, is what you're telling me.
We're doing the best we can with the best information at the time. But Damian, it's never done, right? Yep. Right. You're on a journey. But what I'm trying to get to people to understand is, what is the behavior and the culture of your business? Because we attract people to come and work with us, and we attract being in the top 4% of farms in our province. And how do we know that? Because we have the benchmarking from our accounting firm. Mm-hmm. But the third piece that's the most critical, I think, from our perspective in our conversation today, is how are decisions made? How do you focus and execute? And does each generation in this family business respect each other, and what skill set they're bringing to the table?
So is that the third word? The third word you told me right now: believe, behave, and decide.
Decide. Yeah.
Decide, not B-side. Decide.
No, decide, because decision making is how we show up in business. And the successful businesses are good collaborative decision makers. And there's no ego involved as to whose idea it was. It doesn't matter what's best for the business.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's interesting you bring this up, because there's this other thing that I guess you and I have been around it our whole lives, the people of agriculture. It's not specific to them. It's probably with everybody. And I wrote a book about business, and I found out there's a whole bunch of business people that can't just pull the trigger on decision. And what's interesting is they'll act like they don't have adequate data. And you're finally like, damn it, this is not about data. This is about you not wanting to make a decision. And is it because they're afraid of the responsibility? Maybe. Is it because they're afraid somebody's feelings might get hurt? Probably. Is it because they just absolutely, and you're like, you realize you've got, and I'm guilty of it, we all are, where you're like, damn it, I know I need to make this decision, but it's kind of weighing on me. It's like, it's weighing on you. You'll be better when you are done with it.
When you pull the trigger.
When you pull the trigger, then it's just, it's done. So, and, my wife sometimes and I, we run a business, a couple of them, frankly. And she says, after we'd had some really bad times, things were really bad 20 years ago, financially. And after a couple of years, she says, I miss the certainty. I miss the confidence. And I said, honey, I feel like all I've done is cause us grief for the last 2 years. I'm afraid to make another bad decision. And so you do get shell-shocked after some of that. But ultimately, I think that the most important one there is the decide. And then I'll go back to the behave. You see family units, and I'm from one of these. I'm from a family of agricultural people that are disagreeable, sometimes defiantly dumb. It's one thing to be dumb, but then to be defiantly, disagreeably dumb is remarkable, and not very respectful. And you don't deal that way with the people that you deal with in your business, and it's really remarkable to me how you see that dynamic.
So the interesting question I ask Damian when I see that dynamic is, why are you still there?
Mm-hmm.
That's the powerful question. And for your listeners, there's a great resource by Dr. Henry Cloud, who's a psychologist, and it's called Necessary Endings: What to Do When Things Don't Work Out.
Necessary ending. What to do with things. And so what you're bringing up was, and this is like, you're talking about in the agricultural people where it's a train wreck. And it's emotionally, these people cry, and then you're just like, well, then leave. And is it because of the tie to the land? Is it there's a lot of emotional connection to the land, but there's also, and I have a happy story about this. I was working with a ranch family in Alberta, highly conflicted between the two brothers, and the father, who is also very wise in his approach, he said, look, Elaine, we know this isn't working out. And I do conflict dynamic profiles, which any of your listeners can ask for. It's just a $35 US online assessment to help people how they're doing conflict, what their good behaviors are, and all that good stuff. Anyway, long story short is this young rancher and his wife started reading a chapter of this book every night. And they said, Elaine, this is our life. And I said, okay, what do you want to do about it? They said, we've weighed the pros and the cons. We're going to leave and start a new business that we have total control over. And the interesting thing, Damian, is this rancher dad gave him $1 million startup. Now that's an extreme, like your eyes just caught. Right.
That's not the usual scenario, but it's a very wise scenario because it's the gift of a warm hand instead of a cold one. So that father was almost like the prodigal son, but this guy wasn't the prodigal son. He saw an opportunity to get each of his sons set up in a different way, and different is not wrong. It's just different. Mm-hmm. And I have all these one-liners that I think people need to focus on. It doesn't have to be hard. Transition planning doesn't have to be hard, but you do have to come to the table because, Damian, right now, I cannot read your mind. So you have to talk and ask me questions, and then we can develop a conversation.
You said you can't read my mind, but for we know we pass, and you knew who I was, and I knew who you are. But then you told me a little while ago that I'm contrarian, so we're going to get back to that. But before we do, I want to remind you, dear listeners, if you happen to be watching this, and I hope that you do watch some of these, the Damian Mason channel on YouTube has all kinds of stuff. My agricultural commentary, it's got stuff from me on stage. It's got really cool things on there. So if you're not a subscriber to the Damian Mason channel, just go to YouTube and type in Damian Mason and it'll come up, and hit subscribe. Don't cost you nothing. I'd like you to be there. And also you can see all of these episodes, that extreme ag that I'm doing. And you'll see that I'm wearing my Extreme Ag shirt today, because I also, while you're poking around the internet, I want you to go to extremeag.farm. Extremeag.farm is the media platform that I am contributing to with all of my farmer buddies. Farm forward thinking, progress oriented, success oriented, new product trials. Extremeag.farm. We're doing product trials, we're doing new practices, and we put out new video and podcast content every week. So go to extremeag.farm and also go to the Damian Mason channel on YouTube. Thank you for considering doing that, dear listener. Okay. Elaine Froese, farm transition. We talked a lot about all the problems. Believe, behave, decide. I agree with that. So we think that people don't do it because they don't want to pull the trigger on decision. We talked about the reasons they don't want to do that. What should agricultural, business-minded people do when it comes to this? Because, again, most of my people who are listening to this are very business-minded. That's why they tune in here. What's the right thing that you should do? And
so the first thing is they need to have a talk with themselves, Damian, and they need to draw a line down the middle piece of the paper. And on the left-hand side are their business assets. And on the right-hand side is their personal wealth. And so I'm a big advocate of talking about income streams for the future.
Wait, we just separated, you said business assets and personal wealth. Many small biz people, my farm ground is a business asset. It's also part of my personal wealth. Okay, so Elaine, personal assets and business assets will oftentimes intermingle. I mean, they do here at the De La Rosa Farms, for instance. My farm is a business asset. It's also my personal wealth. So I'm not sure what are we doing there to separate?
Okay, so the reason I'm making the distinction, Damian, is just for visual clarity. And the visual clarity is if you want your farm to stay intact for the next generation and don't want to disrupt a lot of those assets, then what are you going to live on? What's your income stream? So my three key questions that we started at the top of this podcast with was finding fairness in farm nutrition. So my three key questions are, number one, what are your income streams going to be moving forward for the next 20 to 25 years? Number two is, where are you going to live? What's housing looking like? And number three is, how are you going to be fair to your non-business heirs? You have those three questions answered, and you're already very well into a really good plan. And my point for your corporate listeners who have ground in Nebraska and may have a corporate job in Indiana is, do they have a financial planner? And do your parents have a financial planner? Mm-hmm. Because financial planners can help you move assets around to make sure your income stream is secure. Mm-hmm. And that's the reason I wanted to create that visual. Mm-hmm. Because families always say, Elaine, we're overwhelmed, we're anxious, we don't know where to start. Well, start with financial transparency and start with defining. So, Damian, you have your house in Arizona. I'd love to ask you, what do you and your wife need per year to live the life you've always wanted to live? And if your number is $250,000 US, that's an interesting number. But I had a family that said, Elaine, our number is $120,000 a year. I went back to the young ranchers afterwards and I said, what is the real number of money that this ranch is giving to the parents over mm-hmm. time? And they said 38.5. That's a little bit of a gap between what was desired and what was actually cash.
So wait, you just said that you said we think we need $10,000 a month, let's say, and then the real number that they actually had lined up right now was about $3,000 a month.
$40,000 a year.
Yeah. So less than $4,000. So they needed 10 grand a month, and they're sitting there around 3,500 a month.
We haven't discussed needs and wants, Damian. You're jumping ahead of yourself.
Yeah. Right. By the way, that's an interesting thing that I run through this about once a year. I run through what my monthlies are and what I do require. And then obviously I just go about offsetting it with, income streams, as you talked about. And I wonder, is that something that most people do not do? It sounds like they don't.
Well, and especially in agriculture, because it's so commingled between what we need to live as a family and what we have as farm perks. So Dick Whitman from Whitman Consulting, who's a good friend of mine and an excellent consultant, he's now in his 70s, but he has this great thing called the Compensation Worksheet. So it's a tool that listeners can reach out to me for. I'm happy to share it, but it helps Damian see what's paid for by the farm, right? Because when you're no longer on the farm, I had one woman who was in her 80s say, Elaine, I'm not moving. I'm getting $15,000 worth of benefit by staying in the farmyard. So see, and a lot of young farmers, Damian, what really slays me is they're not getting paid enough, because the farm credit survey, there's another webinar called Two Lenders and an Economist by Farm Credit. And they did studies on what people need to live on in different states. And it's anywhere between $70,000 to $84,000 for a family of four.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So before we hit record, and we had a call the other day, coordinating a few things, and you brought up that topic. And on the one hand, I wasn't given anything, and I didn't come back and work on the farm because there was no room, and also it was dysfunctional. I mean, I can go through all these things, but the big part you're talking about there is, so those folks that say, okay, son, daughter, whatever, going to be back on the farm, you're saying there's this whole concept that they don't pay them, and I've heard this again and again and again and again. And it's the old thing of, well, this is all going to be yours someday.
Biggest lie in agriculture.
It's all going to be yours someday. And you're like, okay. Is that documented? Use it. Your big thing. Where is it written? Where is it written that this is going to be mine someday? And if that's the case, let's start talking about the buy-in right now. Am I getting 1% a year? Am I getting 2%? Tell me how this works. And so you hear these things all the time where son, and I'm not being gender specific, works for 30 years because it's all going to be his someday. And then the parents croak and they didn't do estate planning. They didn't do things right. And they're not business minded. And then son's 3 sisters get the same share he gets. It's like, well, I was underpaid for 30 years thinking I was going to get all this. And you hear that all the time.
Yeah. And the new term for that is delayed compensation. But who works for no pay, and who works for 40% or 50% less than what they could get in the agricultural corporate market?
Sure, right. So one of your big takeaways is you think that a lot of the kids, and the thing is, there's this mindset, well, Junior's going to spend that money, have a fancy house and all that. And you're saying, listen, if it's the person's career, right?
Well, and also look at the opportunity in ag, Damian, with the other companies that you work with. What is the opportunity cost of coming back to a farm to work and putting in all that delayed compensation when you could be working in corporate agriculture with a lot less stress, a lot more boundaries on your time? And so it's a conversation. And what we're also talking about is a polarity. So a polarity is a problem that never goes away. It always has to be managed. And what has to be managed in agriculture are expectations.
Mm-hmm. So, number one, you say if your kid's involved, make sure they have compensation. Number two, and I said, it goes on and on. My parents didn't do things right. And I pushed, the reason they even had any legal estate planning was because of my doing. And I'm the youngest of 9 that actually had to push that over to the goal line. And it still wasn't done right. Number one, have an estate plan, have a will. And then secondly, if your kid's back involved, compensate them. And then if you are going to do this, if you are going to do the thing where they get something, you better damn sure make sure you're doing it right versus, because again, you hear that all the time. Guy my age, 57 years old, parents die, and he finds out that he's getting nothing more than what the other 3 siblings are getting. And he was delaying compensation for 30 years to get the same thing that the sister that lives in Omaha is getting. You hear that all the time.
Those are the stories I don't want to hear anymore, Damian. I've been doing this coaching work for decades, and my hashtag on Twitter is Healing Stories #4ag. Mm-hmm. So let's create success stories. Let's copy success. And my website is farmfamilycoach.com. I have a YouTube channel as well. Just type in Farm Family Coach on YouTube. And I have lots of videos, books, and resources for farm families and other people in business, because the principles are the same.
They are the same principles.
To come to the table. Yeah. Okay,
so first off, we're going through it. Have an estate plan, and if you don't, you're responsible. I mean, it's as simple as that. We're not being mean. We're not barking at you. We're not humiliating you in front of people. But if you're listening to this and you don't have any will or estate planning done, you're irresponsible.
Or power of attorney, Damian, which is also part of that conversation with the lawyer. My husband, on October 2nd, 2017, had a smash up with a hydro truck on a grid road, was airlifted to Winnipeg. And my son says, Mom, we got bills to pay. I said, that's fine, son. You have power of attorney. Just go right ahead. And so I'm living this same journey, Damian, that I expect other people in agriculture to execute.
So with your estate and will, make sure that you truly are asking the hard questions and making the difficult decisions when you do that. More importantly, like you say, then you need a power of attorney. When you have an ongoing concern, for God's sakes, paying the bills is one thing. You're talking about what if it's 6 months of medical
and running a multi-million-dollar business.
Yeah. So power of attorney, and then obviously healthcare representative, all those kinds of things. What else do we need to do? Do we need to be doing?
For young families, they need to have a hard conversation of who they want to have guardian of their children and who they want to execute their estate. My father had Alzheimer's, and I found out that I had co-executors on his will that were out of province, which makes executing an estate much more difficult. So I had that changed to that I would be the sole executor, and I had a great relationship with my farming brother, so that's all good. Just the other thing is to decide what you want your role to be, Damian, as you step back from leadership in your business without stepping away. Mm-hmm. And there's another real thing in agriculture. We can do a whole other podcast on letting go. Mm-hmm. And when does the next generation become the main manager, right? Because
that's the other joke all the time is that the 90-year-old guy still wants to run the combine and his 65-year-old son's driving the catch cart. We hear these kinds of jokes all the time.
Yeah, but again, don't repeat those stories anymore.
No, I mean, I always find it to be mildly amusing, but then also on the verge of disgusting, because again, if you're 80 and you want to be involved in the family dry cleaning business, that is fantastic. But you would hope that then you would say, yes, but my 50-year-old daughter is now the active manager of the business, because let's face it, I'm 80. And that in agriculture should be that case. It should be.
Well, and I've written a blog. If people want to sign up for my insights, they come out every 2 weeks. But one of my blogs is strong warning for 80-year-olds. Because if the 80-year-old hangs on to the equity too long, his 60-year-old son doesn't get to be an owner, and the 60-year-old doesn't get to get his 25 or 30-year-old daughter or son any opportunity to leverage equity so that they can start growing their equity base, right? So it has a domino effect. Anyway, it's great to discuss these things, but talk does not cook rice, Damian. Your podcast is lovely to listen to.
Yeah, but you got to do but when the person is done,
if nobody does anything.
When the person's done listening to this, you want them to make sure that they have an estate plan. And you know what? Make sure they have an updated estate plan.
Yes,
you know what?
And signed.
Mine's about 5 years old, and Lori and I had an attorney meeting, some other business, and I said, by the way, this fall we need to do some updates, because a 5-year-old estate plan, lots of stuff moves. There's an evolution here. You're a business person. Power of attorney, very smart thing that you just talked about, and then guardianship of the children. Then also looking at compensation. If you are the son and daughter that are back being told you're going to get all this someday, make sure that actually is happening, because you know what? I can tell you one thing. I don't go and do speaking engagements for free with someone saying, someday I'm going to pay you for that, right?
Exactly.
Because that's really what you're talking about. And then, of course, I like your thing about believe, behave, decide. What else? What else on the way out the door here? Anything?
Just the whole thing is remember that you can just do things in baby steps. So I have another tool I like to give families called binder tabs, because what we've talked about today is a whole lot of things, but the binder tabs chunk it down. So there's an action business. You would love this. There's a business plan tab. There's a tab for legal. There's a tab for debt. There's a tab for accounting. There's a tab for insurance. And there's a tab for your financial planner. And it becomes a planning binder. And that's why we get overwhelmed. And farm families tell me all the time, Elaine, we don't know where to start. I said, what do you want to start with? How about starting with having a cup of coffee with each other and just say, let's put some workable timelines in place. And, Damian, we're harvesting a really late crop here. We're only about 30% done on 5,000 acres. And the days are getting shorter. But you know what? when you're on a piece of machinery going up and down with auto steer and it's not that complicated, you can make a lot of phone calls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and so where is it written? Because again, here's the other thing in agriculture. We'll do it after harvest.
Yeah.
Oh no, Damian, we'll do it after Christmas. Oh no, we'll do it after we get back from Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, we'll do it after Easter. No, we'll do it after planting. No, we'll do it after haying. No, we'll do it after spraying.
Yeah.
And where are you? A whole other 365 days.
You're dead on. By the way, it's funny. My mother, again, was not business minded and things were disastrous. And even though I tried to salvage it, did not make me the executive of the estate. And one of her reasons was that I travel a lot. And the attorney said, Damian seems to be the most business minded of your offspring, Mrs. Mason. And it seems like he conducts business pretty darn well, whether he's in the Denver airport or at his house in Phoenix or on a stage somewhere. And yeah, you don't need to wait until harvest is over to call an attorney and set your appointment. You don't need to wait. You're right about all that. It's all very,
I have people Zoom coaching me from their pickup trucks, Damian.
Yeah. So
which is awesome, right? If you have a problem, address the problem and then execute it and work on the next thing.
You're the one that's the farm family coach, not me, but I want to throw one on here that's at the very core of this. And it doesn't matter whether you are in ag or the dry cleaner hypothetical that we talked about. The discussion, and you said cup of coffee. I don't drink coffee, so I'll drink.
I don't drink coffee either.
I'll drink a Coke. I'll drink a Coke while you drink coffee. But you know what I'm going to do? What outcome do you want? That should be the first thing. Whether you're the kid, the mom, the whoever, what outcome do you want? And that's where you see these people that are so dysfunctionally harming themselves because they won't just actually say, here's what I want. But
they don't know, Damian. Have you asked a farmer or a business person lately, what do you want? What is the life you've always wanted?
Yeah.
And their first response is, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
So then you want to drill down. How do you want to take care of yourself? And I'm trained as a Hudson coach from Santa Barbara, California. It's a very good investment I made in 2003. What do you want personally, Damian? What do you want with your relationship with Lori? That's your wife. What do you want for your family? What do you want for your job, your work, your farm, your business? What do you want for your friendship circle? And what do you want for your community? Those are your 6 key roles. But unfortunately, in agriculture, we have a lot of workaholism going on. Mm-hmm. And we have ads that say, I don't work in hours, I work in acres, which we know which company that is. It's an old ad, but it really bothered me because it just seems to pour more admiration on workaholism. Uh-huh. And the other news flash is, I don't care what your net worth is because you're not taking it with you. Mm-hmm. So what do you want to be stewarding for the next generation? And how do you want to be enjoying life now and as you age and place on your farm? Because I plan to be 102 because I know I have enough money till I'm 102.
Well, I want you to be there. By the way, it's an interesting thing you said about acres and hours and all that. And it's sometimes it almost becomes hyperbole that we hear in agriculture. You know, I'm famous for telling all my people, let's stop with the whole thank a farmer thing. Well, if you ate today, thank a farmer. Like, did you thank the 11-year-old that's toiling in a sweatshop in Bangladesh that stitched together your clothes? No, you probably didn't. So let's not carry on about, the thank a farmer thing, because there's a lot of people that are working in much worse conditions than you that you haven't thanked today that make your life comfortable. Let's talk about this, though, about what you said about when you're in the tractor with auto steer. By golly, you can do some business calls. My brother, the farmer, used to always say that when he would defend my work. It's like some of these ag people think that what you do is not real work because you're not like out here. I said, what? Because I'm not out here sleeving cows. I know how to do that because I'm not here pulling calves. Trust me, I've grown up doing that. Work is work. And I think one thing that ag people, since we think that they tend to avoid this stuff, they'll say they're too busy.
Yes.
And also they don't view it. So first off, they're making excuses when they say that, but also they may not view it as work. I say that this kind of stuff, handling your estate and in your transition and making it your kids, whatever that should be, this is as important of work as feeding the pigs. This is as important of work as spraying the crops. It is. It's just important work. And you are a business and act like it. You know what I mean?
So one of the tools for doing that, Damian, is take your Google Calendar and block the time. Mm-hmm. Just block an hour It's the same thing with marriage. We could do a whole other set on divorce in farms.
Oh yeah.
Are you paying attention to your marriage? And there is a marriage course by Alpha that I've done twice, not because I failed the first time, but my husband and I were hosts, and the premise there is working on the state of your union an hour a week, right? Yeah. And an hour, and you can get in Italy, it's called the pomodoro. So a pomodoro is tomato, and in Italy, their timers look like tomatoes, so they call it one pomodoro. A pomodoro is 25 minutes. Take your phone, set 25 minutes. Just do something focused on what we've been talking about. 25 minutes. Just get the momentum.
Yeah, and I'm with you. There's times that this is amusing, but there's also times that I find it appalling that some of these family transition part of it, the disaster, you and I have heard way too many of the horror stories, and it does not have to be this way. Again, you're a business person, you're in business. For God's sakes, run it like one, treat it like one. And also, like you said, take care of the relationship to make it healthy. And if it's not, it's time to change. Her name's Elaine Froese, and it's spelled Froese, but it's pronounced like the thing that you say when you say it in English. It's a phrase. Elaine Froese. If folks want to see more of her stuff, and I know this is a hell of a topic, I am going to have you back in another year where we'll talk about this, because we could go on three more tangential paths on this thing. If they want to find your stuff, where do they go again?
farmfamilycoach.com.
farmfamilycoach.com. And she and I, she gets on stages and talks, as do I. And I don't know if we've been, I know who you are. You knew who I was, but I don't know we've actually ever been on the same stage together.
I think we might have met at an ag show or an NSA convention somewhere, Damian.
There you go. Till next time, her name's Elaine Froese. Check out her stuff. She'll come back for more of this. And definitely, I know that this is one of those episodes that everybody has some way to relate to this. So I hope it was beneficial to you. Reminder again, Extreme Ag. I'm wearing their shirt, extremeag.farm. I'm doing a lot of really good work with those guys over there. Practices and product trials and educational videos and podcasts. In fact, we even had one of her neighbors in Manitoba, a guy named Riley Anderson, who's doing some affiliate work with Extreme Ag. So go check out extremeag.farm. Until next time, thanks for being here. Thanks, by the way, Elaine. Thank you.
Thanks.
You bet. Till next time, it's the Business of Agriculture. Hey, thanks for being here. This episode of the Business of Agriculture was brought to you by Pattern Ag. You've heard me talk about Pattern Ag because I think it's a pretty cool concept. New technology that allows you to predict the problems you're going to have and therefore treat them before those problems cost you money. What kind of problems am I talking about? Pests and disease. Things like cordon rootworm, sudden death syndrome, cyst nematode, and a whole bunch of other bad things that happen out there in the field that can cost you money. Guess what? Pattern Ag will let you find out ahead of time if the disease or the pest pressure is there, and therefore you're treating it before it costs you any money. What a great concept. Go to pattern.ag, that's www.pattern.ag, to learn more about their product, their technology, how it can make you money, save you yield, and also where you can find a rep that can come out there and do the work for you. Pattern.ag.